My dad passed 2 weeks ago, and in his will it stated I would inherit his property in western Montana. It was an old cabin my grandfather built and was used as a camp for when we'd go hunting. My dad tried to keep the tradition alive with me, but I wasn't much of a hunter. Once he learned that I tried ice fishing and I preferred that to shooting, though I still wasn't too good at it. To honor his memory, I plan to go back to the cabin for a weekend of ice fishing before I sell the property. All of my dad's equipment was still at my mom's house in the garage, boxed away. I packed warm, clean clothes, blankets, a sleeping bag, and toiletries. The rest would be from my dad's stuff. I planned the drive so that I would get there before dark. It was a 3-hour drive. The weather was clear and cool, but forecast says to expect change. When I got close to the property, the snow was becoming too deep for me to drive in, and I had to leave the car on the road and walk. About 2 kilometers into the woods stood that old cedar cabin, big enough for 2 cots and an old stone fireplace. The sun was setting, and my dad told me as a kid the best times for ice fishing was just after sunrise and sunset. I grabbed my gear and hit the ice. As I sat there, I heard something in the wind. Sounded like voices talking, but there was nobody in sight. I figured I must be tired from the long drive and the cold weather and decided to reel it in. As I was walking back to the cabin, I heard the voices again. They were whispering, and I couldn't make out any words, but I could hear talking. Is anyone there? I flashed my lantern outwards. Silence. I got back to the cabin, started a fire, and got ready for bed. As I lie awake, I hear the caribou whining in the forest. I feel myself starting to slowly drift to sleep, when suddenly the cabin started to violently shake. Pictures fell off the walls, ground began to rumble, and the lantern on the ceiling swayed. The next morning, I got up at sunrise to head for the ice. The cabin was dark and I couldn't see through any of the windows. I went for the door and was greeted with a wall of snow. In my sleep, there had been an avalanche and the cabin was now buried underneath it. I have no way to get out and no signal to call for help. It could be days before anyone finds me. My only hope is to take the axe for the firewood and try to crack open the ceiling to see how deep the snow actually is. The wood, though old, is thick and sturdy. I can't break through. I began to tear apart the cabin, looking for anything of use to get me out. My mind began to race. What if I'm never found? Maybe if I start a fire, the smoke can signal help nearby. Maybe I can squeeze my way up the chimney and get out. If I had a flare gun, I would shoot it out of the chimney and somebody might see it. I started a fire in hopes somebody would see the smoke from the chimney. Days passed with no food, and the only drinking water I had left was from the melted snow. I started a fire in the opposite corner of the cabin, and the smoke put me to sleep. I was woken up some time later to the door being kicked in. It was volunteer firefighters. The fire had spread at this point to the door jamb, and the cabin was coming down. They were too late. I was already dead. I have only been driving for just under a year. I've never had to drive in the snow before, so my car sliding on the ice and getting pulled by ruts made me extremely nervous. Because of this, I was driving slower than the majority of people on the roads. I should also say I'm a very non-confrontational person. This will be important later. The day in particular, we got maybe a foot or 2 of snow, and from what I've learned, some people on the roads lose all common sense when it snows. So leaving early was something I knew I needed to do if I wanted to get to my job at the cinema on the other side of town. Traffic was really heavy, and I was in my lemon car, which was a 2004 Toyota Matrix that I got really cheap because it had some issues. I was basically crawling because one of the lanes was blocked and the snow didn't help. My eyes felt heavy as I sat waiting when I was blinded by headlights behind me. It caught my attention. It was a huge black truck with really tinted windows. I couldn't see anybody in the truck due to how dark the front window was. Something felt off when I looked back, but I thought maybe it was just because of how ominous the truck was. The truck behind me started to honk. I assumed it was at me, but wasn't sure why they were honking because traffic wasn't moving. Before I could even figure out why they were honking, the black truck swerved into the left lane, and now was trying to pull in front of me. I was so confused as to why he was now trying to get in front of me, when none of us were moving. Even though I couldn't let him in, I wasn't going to even when we started moving. I didn't know what his deal was, but I didn't have a good feeling, because what if he blocked me in by being in front of me? The honking just kept going on, and eventually the line of cars started to slowly move. I stayed right behind the car that was in front of me, and the truck was trying to force its way in. But I wasn't going to let it. What I was scared of was now the truck started to roll down its passenger window to reveal a grown man who had dark stubble, messy hair that was hidden by a baseball cap, and eyes that looked like he was ready to jump out of the truck and kill me. Since I was now scared and hated confrontation, I kept my eyes straight ahead and kept moving. He forced his way in behind me and was riding the back of my car. I gripped my steering wheel, trying not to panic, and trying to think of what I could do when all of a sudden I was jolted forward. My car was hit from behind. I've never been hit before, or in a situation like this, but I remember thinking I can't stop moving if this person is clearly aggressive. As I slowly made my way past the buildup of traffic, I was hit once again from the truck behind me. All I kept saying in my head was, "Where's the closest police station? Oh God, stay calm." I drove maybe 2 blocks trying to get the truck to stop following me, but it always stayed right on my tail. Eventually I came to a red light, and of course I had to stop. I was hit from behind once again, and the sound of the truck's horn filled the quiet space. At this point, I tried to grab my phone. My hands were very shaky from being hit and chased. When I was dialing 911, the car jolted forward once again, and I dropped my phone, and as I was trying to pick it up again, the light turned green. I felt my hands were shaking even worse now. I was sweating and felt like whoever this person was going to kill me. I don't understand why no one was helping, but later I realized, what could I do to help someone being chased by a psychopath with road rage? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. At this point, I started swerving from lane to lane, trying to lose the truck, but the truck stayed right behind me. I'm not a religious person, but I started to pray I'd be okay, pray that everybody else on the road around us would also be okay, and pray he would stop. He kept bumping my car and honking his horn, but just at that moment, I thought my prayers were answered. The light was yellow, and I knew if I timed it properly, I could make it across before traffic would start and block the truck from crossing. I pressed my foot down on the pedal and floored it to make the light. I started to chuckle. I don't know why, but I started to laugh while tears ran down my cheeks. It didn't last long, because as I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw the black truck ram into a white van that was turning. He was heading my way once again. He didn't stop after the accident. And once again, I was the prey, and I was being hunted. I now thought maybe I could turn onto a residential street. I could lose him since he still hadn't caught up with me. I turned down a road and turned whenever I could, and I lost the truck. But that was until he was about to drive past to where I turned, but slammed on his brakes and sped towards me. I eventually found my way out of the residential area. I had believed I just became the luckiest person. In front of me, a block away, was a police station. I beelined it to the police parking lot, and as I entered the parking lot, I looked back to see if he had been following me. But the black truck was stopped still in the residential area. Eventually, he drove down the road away from the police station. I ran inside when I saw the truck leaving, and the officers inside stared at me as I ran in. A woman officer came to talk to me, and I broke down crying. I explained to her what happened, and she said they had gotten around 30 calls about a black truck chasing and hitting a smaller vehicle. Some of the callers caught the license plate. They instantly sent out officers to try find the vehicle and the guy. And since he rolled down his window, I was able to describe what he looked like. I'm not sure if they ever caught him, but the police never called me to update me on the situation. It was the scariest thing that had ever happened to me, and I am extra aware when I drive now. So if you ever experience someone with road rage, don't stop driving and find the closest police station. This isn't anything too long or scary, but I think it was one of the scariest moments for me. One time I was snowboarding in the mountains, and I got stuck in an air pocket at the base of a tree. I remember I sat there for an hour before anyone found me. I was lucky I had a granola bar in my pocket from the day prior from work. I had the worst timing because when I fell into the snow, my phone flew out of my pocket and I never found it. Since my phone wasn't in the air pocket with me, I couldn't call for help. I just had to wait. I always thought people who got stuck in air pockets were lying and could have gotten out, but I know now you really can't. And if you move, it may make everything worse. So a takeaway from this experience is to always zip up your pockets that your phone is in. Be patient and pray that someone stumbles upon you, because if not, you might not make it off the hill. I have a story, and let's start with I almost died. I'm sorry in advance if the sentences are weird or if there's any grammar mistakes. I was never the best at writing. When I was in high school, I was a huge partier, and so was my childhood best friend. We'll call him Brett. Brett's family was loaded and had a bunch of places all over the world, their beach house being my favorite. During reading week, Brett and I wanted to host and throw a party. And since it was November, we thought we could go out to Brett's family's ski and mountain cabin for a few days, do some skiing and plan a huge party and invite a bunch of people. We weren't allowed to throw parties since we had one really bad experience when the whole house was trashed, so we came up with a plan to go alone. Said we just wanted to go skiing. We planned to leave on Sunday and be there by Monday, because it was almost a day's drive. We packed our skis, stopped off, got booze and food to last us a few days and enough for everybody. The ride was normal, the typical slippery roads, music, lots of sleep, and beautiful scenery. We arrived on Monday morning like we planned. We didn't want to unpack anything until we went down a few slopes. We ended up skiing for a few hours and eventually returned to the cabin to unpack everything. The cabin is how I remembered it, the hardwood floors feeling so cold I could feel it through my socks. The 3 bedrooms remained untouched, and the bathroom had ice buildup in the sink and the bathtub, almost like they were leaking. I threw my bag on the couch and helped Brett plug in the fridge and the freezer and turn on the heat. We decided to leave the food in the car until the fridge got cold so the food didn't go bad. It was maybe an hour or so when we decided the fridge was cold enough and went out to get the food. It started to get dark, and I remember turning on the lights in the car. With the food now in the house, we began to relax and decided to watch a movie. Around 30 minutes into the movie, the power went out, and because of this, the furnace also stopped producing heat. I should also mention it gets below -30, so it is so cold you could get frostbite. Brett got up saying this happened once before, we need to check the power lines and make sure that the snow didn't pull them down. As we looked outside, we saw that where the power line used to be was now an empty space. We tried to call to inform someone, but we had no service. The cabin was getting cold really fast, so we decided that there isn't anything we can do. We'll get in the car and drive to the nearest motel since it wasn't safe to drive while it was snowing and dark. So going home wasn't an option tonight. We grabbed what we needed and made our way through the snow. The car was even colder than the cabin. I remember telling Brett to turn on the heat. Brett started to scream, No, shit! I stared at him as he was trying to turn the key, but the car wasn't starting. We left the light on in the car, which drained the battery. We were now stranded in a snowstorm with -30 weather, no heat, and no way to call for help. We were screwed. The cabin was the better choice to stay in since the car was small and practically frozen at this point. Brett stayed calm and I was panicking. We're going to freeze and die up here, no one will find us, kept running through my head. The closest neighbor was 2 miles away, so we were practically alone, and even if we walked those 2 miles, there wasn't a guarantee that they would be up here for the weekend. We thought maybe they knew the power line was down, and someone would be coming, so we sat there for an hour with blankets and dressed in our full ski gear. I think we need to walk and get help, because it isn't smart for us to stay here overnight without power. Brett stared out the window as he said this. As we watched as the daylight started to fade, I told him it was a stupid idea and it would be safer if we stayed put. Brett was set on walking and said I could stay put and he'll go because he knows the way. I had a bad feeling about him leaving, but I wasn't going out there to freeze to death, especially with night coming. I gave him my gloves and hat to layer up since it would be way colder out there, and he walked into the blizzard. I may be a man, but I won't lie. I started crying, because what if Brett never came back and I freeze to death? It felt like hours passed as I sat staring out the window. I was shivering so much my muscles started to hurt. I remember eventually falling asleep and woke up to a banging sound on the window. I thought Brett was back and trying to let me know to let him in. I ran to the door, swinging it open, but there was nothing there but the snowstorm outside. It had gotten worse. Now you can't see anything but the snow swirling around. I was confused what the banging noise was, but it was a branch that got blown under the window and was moving in the wind. All the water was frozen now, and the only food we bought that wasn't meant to be cooked was bags of chips and one thing of Twizzlers. I don't know if it was the cold, but I kept wanting to sleep. It was to the point I didn't realize it had been 24 hours since Brett left. I stayed trapped in the cabin for 5 days until the police came banging on the door to get me. Brett wasn't with them. I kept asking, "Where's Brett?" I was brought to the hospital and was pumped with fluids and warm blankets. When I woke up, Brett was beside me, but he wasn't awake. He had fallen down the hill the first day and was found by someone driving on the road at the bottom of the hill. No one knows how he survived, but he did, and he didn't even have a scratch except for his pinky that got frostbite. We are both fine and are still friends 8 years later, and laugh about it now. I still like the beach house the best. Hello, and thank you so much if you made it to the end of the video. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to let me know you'd like to see more content like this. If you have any stories you'd like to share that could be in a future video, make sure to head over to Reddit, or you can send it through email. My Reddit and email will be shown on the screen. Thank you so much for watching and have a good morning, evening, or night. Bye guys!